You've never met anyone quite like John. He's been a recipient of Family of Woodstock services over the course of almost his entire life. Now, he's mentoring, he's giving back to family through volunteering, and having relationships with his family like never before. You want to know what John is about? He'll tell you. Looking at Darmstadt behind you, all of the stories that you told me when we talked earlier are really starting to take shape for me now. And especially that first story you told me about when you were 13 years old.
My first experience with family was pretty much taking advantage of the free store that they used to have, which back in those days was outside on the porch. And after they closed at 9 o'clock at night, there was nobody there, and a bunch of clothespins that were quite comfortable and warm to climb into if you're a homeless kid, you know, to get out of the weather. And they knew I was doing it and let me get away with it, and would give me warm tea or coffee in the morning, and it pretty much became my family from that point on.
That word family keeps coming up, and although it's part of the name Family of Woodstock, people say it with this love in their eyes. What's your love for family?
Well, my love for family might be a little different than other people's, but for me, and at a very young age, my own family, I like to say they ran away from home, and I stayed in my little village, and if it wasn't for Family of Woodstock, I wouldn't have had a way to come up. You know, I would have just been another street kid. And with family's help, I was able to secure a lot of the different things I needed, you know, as a young kid, like bus vouchers to go look for jobs, or, you know, just a place to get off the street and use a phone. Back then they didn't have cell phones, you know, only pay phones. And payphones were a quarter, you know, so you had to go to family to make a phone call.
And you're bringing up phones, and I know that family hosts the oldest crisis hotline in the country right now. Have you taken part in using the hotline?
A number of times I have, and one of the first times that I ever did that was in my late teens. I had gone out west. I was actually heading back from out west, making my way back towards Woodstock, and was having a very difficult time of it. I had gotten strung out on drugs, and I was pretty much at my wit's end at the time, and I was at a hospital trying to get help and was refused help there, and somebody handed me a card with a suicide hotline number on it. And after walking around with that in my pocket for an hour, I decided to call it, and by absolute coincidence, I wound up getting Family of Woodstock, and it was an old high school friend of mine's mother manning the hotline that night, and she wound up talking to me for like 3 hours, and I had a whole new outlook on life by the next morning.
I'm wondering if family has helped you with any kind of the drug addiction that you mentioned.
Family was able to secure services for me to get detoxed and to get into a facility where I could get a few months under my belt. And then they were also able to help me get on a program where I could properly medicate myself in the meantime and go on with my life and become, you know, a functioning member of society, as opposed to, you know, somebody who had nowhere to go with his life otherwise. And since then, I've made enormous changes in my life. You know, I've been clean and sober going on 25 years now.
Wow, congratulations.
And thank you very much for that. And I volunteer a lot for family, taking folks that don't have a car to their doctor's appointments. I bring food to people that can't get out and go shopping. I take people shopping. I do things like that to give back now.
Family of Woodstock has come into your life at various different points that were really big changing times for you.
Absolutely. I mean, they really were. If it wasn't for some of those changes, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. So I credit family with helping me grow up. I credit family with a number of different changes in my life. I mean, I've used services such as Evolve, their anger management program.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what Evolve does and did for you?
So Evolve is an anger management program that was set up, I believe, in the mid or early 80s for a lot of folks that were having not only domestic abuse problems, but for a lot of young men coming out of jail as well. And a lot of the folks that went through that program were court mandated to it. But it was at a time in my life when I knew that I had issues. I was in my mid-20s when I realized I had issues in that area and needed their help, and I wasn't just about everybody in there was court mandated. I wanted to go.
When you told me your story about being a 13-year-old in 1972 on the front porch of family, and I've heard so many of these stories about that front porch and where you've gone between 1972 and now, and how family kind of has been interwoven in that journey of yours. How do you keep going?
That's a really good question. It's a strong question. You know, my wife passed away 3 years ago, and I had a really difficult time with that. She was my purpose for a very long time. I would have credited her with my way that I keep going, but I can't use her as the way to answer that question now because she's not here. So for the last 3 years, you know, I just put one foot in front of the other. I take my life one day at a time. I try not to take anything too terribly serious, and I really, really do try and keep a smile on my face and share that with other people. I try and pay it forward. It's really important. It goes right back to what I learned in Evolve, you know, because I could have very easily become a monster or an extremely angry person or an extremely dead person, you know. The only reason I'm the person I am now is through a lot of the services that family helped provide for me. And I wanted to say too that to me, family is like this little in-between thing where for people who can't really get into where the real help is, like at social services or food stamps or a lot of the government bureaucracies, it's hard to navigate those places. And a lot of times, if you're strung out on drugs or you're homeless or any other number of different things that might be going on in somebody's life, you know, spousal abuses, things like that, only then to try and navigate these other situations becomes very difficult.
Let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever felt judged by anyone working for family?
No. Family, for me, is like, it's like going home to your family and saying, Mom, I don't know what to do now, what do I do? And there's people there to help you. I've never been judged, and I've always been offered a way to help myself. No.
You say that with such love in your eyes, John.
Well, it's hard to say because I judge myself. I've never met anybody that doesn't judge. Everybody I've ever met in my life judges, including myself, and nobody judges me harder than I judge myself. And yet still, I can walk into that little building and not be judged by those folks, ever. It's the most warm and loving feeling I've ever experienced.
I know that you said you try to take joy in every day. You try to take one day at a time, one step at a time. Where do you find your joy?
I have hobbies. I play a little bit of music. I drum. I play drums, and I try and pass that on to young kids. I try and teach. So I do love music, and I love drumming.
You have this great evolution over the course of your life, all of these years with family. If you could embody that in a thought, an idea.
I would have to say home. I have 2 beautiful children and 5 amazing grandchildren, and now I'm in their lives. They found me as an adult. I didn't know them as children because of everything I explained to you. So I have a family now that's a beautiful thing that I wouldn't have if it wasn't for Family of Woodstock.
Where do you see your life going from here?
Stay a part of my family, and I could see my grandkids grow up to be, you know, adults with some less problems than what I had.
From that 13-year-old boy on that front porch to who you are now is such an amazing example of what people can accomplish when they just give of themselves, when they don't judge, and they just want to help you.
It's so very true.